What kind of mindset do you have? Reactive, where you deal with things when they happen? Or are you more of a proactive person who plans, looks at options, and then is ready to go? Imagine you have a small window to make a decision and people's lives depended on it. Your life depended on it. What would you do? Today's leader is more stressed than ever. The studies show it, the evidence when we've spoken to leaders in various scenarios, those stress levels are high due to many reasons from ongoing demands, the ability to manage it all, the boundaries between the different roles people have. And this can affect our decision-making processes. Often when we're stressed and decisions need to be made, sometimes in quick succession, we have a very limited window. And this can impact the way that we handle a situation and therefore the decisions we make. Finding the mental space can become a challenge. Often, we need someone to listen, soundboard ideas, and maybe even a wingman or a wingwoman. My guest today is Paul Littlejohn, aka the Wingman. Paul started his career as a fighter pilot with the RAF and the US Marine Corps. He then transitioned into the business world, first as a consultant and later held executive operational roles at global companies like the Emirates Group and FTI. Now he's an executive advisor and the eponymous Wingman. Welcome to today's You Got This podcast session, Paul. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you for that amazing introduction. And it's lovely to be here with you today.
Awesome. So, Paul, you and I have had this amazing conversation and a series of conversations before we got to today's recording. And your experience is so vast and you share such wisdom and anecdotes based on your experience. So it'll be really good for us to go straight into this. Like, you call yourself the wingman. This comes from your background. Can you tell us more about your experiences and, what's happened along the way?
Absolutely. The wingman thing was an idea I've had for a while because as a fighter pilot, we never do anything by ourselves. Every single mission, you're there with a wingman or a wingwoman on your wing. And their job was visual mutual support. They were there to look after you, to make sure you were going on track, to provide that support, to be looking where you weren't looking. And it just became a habit that we collaborated, to use a more business term, that we worked together to solve these very difficult problems. And that domain was exceptionally challenging. I honestly say to this day that it was an impossible job, and we just kept trying it every day, and we made mistakes and we kept learning, and hopefully those mistakes weren't too big. But it really challenged everybody to the limits of their mental and physical capacity. So having somebody to support you just seemed natural. And when I came into business, this concept was much less prevalent. The idea of collaboration versus competition was much less than I was experiencing from the military, which was kind of ironic because our whole job was competition in the most extreme way. But the way we did that was through working together, and everything was a team effort. And so one of the things that I sought out in business, because it was all new to me, was people to collaborate with, people to help me, people to support me, people to give me the things that I wasn't looking at. And really what Wingman is the chance to give back, to work with high-performing people and who are doing difficult and challenging things, and to provide that mutual support, that to look where you're not looking, to make sure that you're pointing in the right direction, to make sure that everything's covered, and to be that kind of check, balance, support, and wingman for people doing difficult things.
That's so amazing. And, often we don't know we need that person. And it's only when we're given that opportunity, maybe working with someone like you, working with a mentor, working with a coach, you suddenly realize that there is help available. And when it's genuinely given, it can really be transformational for the individual having that support network.
I think so. I mean, I have mentors and coaches myself. I surround myself with good people that provide genuine care and concern for what I'm doing. The challenge is that many people rely on friends or family to be that kind of, what do you think of this? Should I do that? And there's a couple of challenges with that. One is genuine interest. Everyone's got their own lives going on, and it's busy and it's hard, and you haven't got time for somebody else's problems. And the other is just, do they have the experience that you need if you're doing clever and difficult and complicated things to really add much value? So finding somebody that is devoting their time to you, whether that be a coach for an hour to listen to you and to let you get everything out, whether that be a mentor who's been down the path where you're going on and is going to give you some help on that way, or in my case, a wingman who's there to provide a mix of those things and that more holistic mutual support, I think is really important. And I think you're right. People don't focus on getting support enough. And when they do, it tends to be ad hoc, and it tends to be friends and family.
Yeah, wonderful. Makes so much sense. Paul, your background coming from the RAF and the Marine Corps, that put you in some like situations that everyday people, civilians, we wouldn't know, what they are. Like, what did those things teach you about yourself, and then the things you're doing now with the work you do?
I think one of the best ways of explaining it is that you kind of have a fixed set of emotions and feelings and challenges. What changes is how relative they are, if that makes sense. So as a fighter pilot, we went through years and years and years of training. We focused on this as a profession, but wherever you were in that journey, whether it was your first solo flight in a Bulldog, or the first combat mission, or the first time behind the tanker, the feeling was broadly the same. And I have the same feelings today when I stand up and do public speaking. It's that we only have so many ways of responding to stressors. And while if you look over at somebody else and go, oh, I just can't imagine being there, there's usually a backstory to that means that relative for them, this is a comfort zone or it's a stress area. And so for me, for everyone, it's easy if you know the answer. And for us, we were put through all that training, and that put us into these situations, which, as I say, I look back on and really can't believe how we did it. But at the time, we were highly focused, highly trained. We were very practiced. And that's what enabled us to do some of these more challenging things. And that's true then in almost every domain. If you focus on it, if you understand it, if you practice it consistently, if you get feedback on that, then what was scaring you last week doesn't scare you today. But then hopefully you're finding something new to challenge you. And I think that's probably the biggest difference about being a fighter pilot, is there was never a comfort zone. It was so dynamic and so complex that there was always this kind of low level, we called it arousal on the performance arousal curve, but this level of stress, not in a negative way. I don't mean that in I'm stressed out way, but in terms of a stimulus coming into your body that kept you alert. And so there was never a time where you could sit back and relax. And indeed, when that happened, that was usually very, very dangerous. So at around about 1,000 hours of flying experience in a fast jet, there was a known period where pilots would become a little bit complacent. They'd seen a lot, they'd done a lot, and they'd kind of switched off or relaxed a little bit. And that's when we tended to see a spike in accidents that we were really careful for. Not sure I answered your question there, but yes. So I think it's all relative, and I think people shouldn't think that they have a different set of feelings and experiences than anybody else. It's just what triggers those experiences and then how to deal with them.
No, you answered the question. I think that's like really amazing the way that you described it, because in our day-to-day jobs or in our day-to-day lives, we will experience stress in different ways, and the impact it has on our bodies is the same, and like you said, it's relative. It's like a doctor in an operating theater saving someone's life, right? Then there will be something. Maybe I should get a doctor on for my next podcast
That's a
episode.
good idea.
Thanks, you've inspired me, Paul. So for me, it almost feels like being prepared is really important. Yet there may be situations where we face something and we have to be able to deal with it in that moment in a different way, or in a way in which we've been maybe informed but not really experienced it, if that makes sense.
It really does. And accidentally, you've kind of stumbled onto the mindset that I genuinely apply, which is that you spoke at the beginning about preparation, people that plan and people that just kind of get on with it. And funny old thing, it's a mix of both. But essentially, preparation and planning is so vitally important. Our brains have got limited mental capacity. And we're not able to process the world around us as it is. We use a bunch of heuristics just to keep up with day to day, let alone when things get complex. So the more planning we've done, and preparation, I think is probably the better word, we've done to understand what we're trying to do, the world that we're going to be operating in, the potential risks, that all helps us when we get downrange and now we have to think on our feet. Because that then allows us to work out what information is important. We always have to filter information out. We can't process everything. So understanding what to filter out, what's not important and what is important is really important. And what's unique about that is that was the domain that we were in, as I said before, is that the world was very complex and constantly changing. So we planned a lot, but we knew the plan wasn't going to be what we actually did. But then we based our real-time decisions off the quality of the plan. That allowed us to speak to each other very quickly about where we are in time and space, because we knew what the plan said we were supposed to be in time and place. And it's really funny because I've been working with startups this week, and it's the same thing when you start building your business plan and your KPIs. You go, well, I don't know where I'm going to be in a year. And you go, I agree. But let's have a plan so we know whether we're above it, below it, on it. And therefore we can then make some adjustments as things change down the future, in the future. And it's this weird, it is slightly contradictory, but it's this weird as have a plan knowing you're never going to be on it. And then use that plan to adjust when real world comes and hits you in the face, which it always does.
When the real world comes and hits you in the face. Wow, that's deep. It reminds me of when you create goals, when we create goals, it allows us to then create an action plan. But if we dream about what we want to do and it's just in our heads, then it might just stay there and it might just remain a dream. But getting it on paper, having that plan and, following it to the extent that you can, I think that's so important, especially in the world that, you work in. When you're working with leaders and organizations, those goal setting becomes so essential to measure your success and that of your clients as well.
Absolutely. We need the first principle of war is selection and maintenance of the aim. What is it you're trying to do? And when we've learned this over hundreds of years of doing this, is that if you don't know what good looks like, if you don't know what success is, then you can't really ever get there. And this is covered through memes and sayings throughout history. But yeah, understanding that vision of what good looks like. And I've noticed it's a real gap in business, especially long-standing business and corporates where people have been doing a job for a long time, is they've long since forgotten what good is supposed to be. It's become a process rather than becoming a journey to a destination. And so again, there's another paradox here, is that we can spend too long planning. And I think, and the other challenge I think with goals is having too far of a decision horizon. So through no choice of ours, in a cockpit, our decision horizon was minutes, sometimes seconds. There was no point planning for an hour's time because thousands of things were going to change between now and that hour. So what I see with people making decisions is often they have a plan which is a long way out in front, and there's going to be so much change. And if you plan out that whole year, and you'll have seen this in corporate budgeting exercises, we'll budget next year's budget, and then every 2 months we do a reforecast exercise. It's essentially that, and I highly recommend that people bring that decision window forward and go, okay, my goal for something that's a week, 2 weeks, 2 months, depending on your endeavor, is this, because then the things that are going to change on the journey are going to be much less and much closer to your plan, probably. And so I think that this cycle of quicker decisions moving you along a journey towards a bigger destination is really one of the tools that we built, because it was the only way to move from where we were to the target and back again in a dynamic environment.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing that experience and those insights. And so then you moved into the business world, working in the space of HR. So as a senior member of an organization within the field that you are operating in, what are those key things that you think matter in today's world?
So yeah, my functions, I run a few functions through operations and through transformation. And I think it's an element that's missing in our leadership development is that we talk a lot about a lot of the good soft skills, which are vitally important in leadership. We talk a little bit about some functional skills in leadership, managing meetings, setting goals, process, stuff like this. I think we don't talk enough about what leadership actually is, about this, about why we have them, what it is the function of a leader is. And I think that's a huge gap. And it's contrasts very much with my previous experience, because at 15 years old, when I first went for selection, the first exercise we did, 5 of us with our bibs on, were asked to get across a warehouse with various planks and poles, and there was various boxes that we could use to not touch the floor on the way. And we were put in a team of 5 and we were asked to get on with it. And almost nobody, in fact, I don't think anybody gets across that first attempt. And then a few minutes later, they come back and we go to another similar exercise, but laid out differently. And they just randomly pick somebody in the group of 5 people and say, right, you're now in charge. And now you start seeing numbers like 80, 90% of the teams getting across. Not because that person had any specific knowledge, but simply because now the team had cohesion through leadership. And this principle, I just don't see it. I don't see, at least not in sufficient volume to make a difference, that there's an understanding that when you move into a leadership position, that your function has fundamentally changed. And this is one of the things that I tried to do a lot as I moved into my corporate experience, because it was just natural to me, is this nature of command, what it means to be a leader, and the roles and functions that you're expected to carry out as a leader. And they broadly broke down into number 1, and we've just talked about this, is set direction. The job of the leader is to say, do we go left, boss, or do we go right? Which way? Okay, let's go. We're going right today. And at the end, or why are we climbing this mountain? Or why are we trying to deliver this particular project? What's the vision? What does good look like? What are we working towards? And if you're listeners, and if you take some time to unpack that, that starts to fall into all the things that we talk about in terms of motivating, is our purpose and our why, give somebody a reason to come into work and do the right thing. And that's kind of the first responsibility of a leader, is to decide where we're going. The second then is to take accountability for everything that happens having made that decision. And that's another one that's really hard to find in volume in the business place, is this understanding that anything good or bad that happens in your team is your fault or your success. There is no, they could have been better, they're your team, which takes us then on to the next point, which is you've got to support your team. If Paul doesn't do the thing and this is a crazy lesson that I had with all my teams. I don't do this very early on because it's a bit of a shock in the business world, but 6 months or so into working with a team, I'll say that we were taught, 21 years old, as an officer in charge of people that were 40, 50, people with deep domain expertise. I was the officer, I was the boss. We were taught that if somebody doesn't do the thing you've asked them to do, it's because you gave a bad order. And that's a really hard message. And you see people kind of intellectually go, yeah, okay, I can understand that. And then 2 seconds later in practice go, no, Paul's an idiot. Why isn't he doing what I've asked him to do? And when we unpack, how clear did we communicate? Did they hear what we thought we'd said? Have we even given them the skills, knowledge, and experience they need to do the thing we've asked them to do? Have we ever given them the ability to make decisions before, and are they not practiced at that skill set? So these were the things that I came into business with, and felt at the time that it was a very different way of leading, and then had what I like to think was huge success with my teams, and they certainly enjoyed the success that we had through doing it, and the freedom and the accountability to get things done. And I think that's what really motivates people, is getting together in a team, back to our collaboration, and doing something difficult. And when people talk about work hard, play hard, because this always made me smile in business. So work hard, play hard. I was like, okay, kind of. Was that you only get that work hard, play hard feeling when you're doing that hard work bit. When there's a group of you that gets together and goes and does something hard, whether that's a Sunday morning hike in the mountains or not, or whether that's solving a difficult tech problem, or whether that's launching a new product, or whether that's moving a customer KPI a couple of points up. As long as that's a challenging goal that requires you to think and engage and problem solve and do something special, that's when you get the play hard feeling at the back of it, which everyone kind of wants.
Yeah, no. I remember those days when in my consulting days, or even now still working on projects, that satisfaction of, the team in a project room together, hours hitting those key milestones, and you feel you're worthy of the play hard because you've collectively put that effort in. So I completely understand where you're coming from on that one.
And you're going to try and make a business. And if people listening reflect on your business or reflect on the people you're with, is it just day after day after day after day after day? Or is it a series of come in, solve difficult, challenging problem, celebrate, come in, solve different challenging problems, celebrate, have a bit of a rest because we can't surge all the time, solve difficult problem. Because if you can get that tempo into your company, those are the places that people want to work.
Yeah, no, that's
The way
amazing.
that's where you get people giving you what we call discretionary effort, where people go above and beyond because they're invested in that passion project. And even if that's 2 days, 2 weeks, you'll get so much more out of your people. And more importantly, they'll enjoy it more and they'll learn and they'll go home. And I've had members of my team that have been inspired because we're trying to solve a problem, come in and go, oh, I've just signed up for this course on X so that I can get better at this in my own time. And that's when I feel bad because what really a company should be doing is going, well, you shouldn't have done that. We've got this that we'll pay for you. But we're not quite that place yet in lots of companies. But that's the kind of environment that I was trying to generate. And because it's what I recognized from when we were doing these exceptional things.
Yeah, no, it's amazing that link between those experiences you had early on in your career and then how you've translated them. It's sometimes we don't think in that way because we haven't had the time or the opportunities to be operating at that level. So then, but I also believe we can learn, right? So you can look up to your
Agreed.
leader, you can look up to your manager, and you can mimic what they do. Or you can take what resonates about them and apply it in your own management or leadership style. And I think that's really important. That's what makes a good leader as well for me, is that they're demonstrating behaviors and then they're walking the walk and they're talking the talk and walking the walk. So they're an authentic leader. And I think all of these things matter for us to then have people going that extra mile, as you mentioned. This nicely takes me onto the next thing I really wanted to cover, which is about everything is people. Like no organization can operate without its workforce. And I was going to say gone are the days when we're treated as cogs and we're doing a
Not
traditional
gone.
production line, but actually, is it gone? And you're shaking your head, so I would love to hear your views on this one.
I don't think it's gone at all. And I think the reason for this, and we kind of talked earlier on about this role of leadership and this role of command, that's a people function. There's just a people function to gather a group of individuals and move them successfully towards the achievement of an objective. That is a leadership function. It's about people. And we're not training that. And therefore we default back to what has been the dominant management theory for the last few hundred years, which is this industrial revolution, process optimization, which is great in a way, but treating people as parts of a process and not treating them as people. And a lot of work, and this is particularly true in Dubai, a lot of work that maybe humans shouldn't be doing nowadays is still done by humans. So it becomes very transactional, very functional, and we're just not good at those jobs. That's the problem is that if it's repetitive and it involves numbers, we're awful at it. Do you know what I mean? We're not consistent. Our brains drift off and we transpose numbers. I remember at the airport, we had our drivers had to read ULD numbers. So the loading pallets that you put your bags in, they've got numbers on them. And frequently they would make mistakes reading those numbers. And there was lots of consternation. How do we make them read better? Why are they so bad? And like, this is just a human failing. We often transpose numbers. It's difficult. You have to be completely focused, and you can't expect someone doing a 12-hour day in 40-degree heat driving around to be 100% focused every time he reads that number. I can demand he's focused. Well, you can do that all you want. It's not going to change. So I don't think we've got away from understanding how we employ people at work. I think the theory is there. I think the writing, the books, I think the discourse in the world of leadership and the world of academia understands this. Simon Sinek et al. Have been talking about this for years. I just don't think businesses have yet moved on. And I think the reason for that is that we just don't train our leaders to understand their function properly. And they just become higher paid transactors in the system. And therefore what they know how to do is the job they've just done. So what's their function? Tell people how to do the job they're doing. And you're back into this I'm a robot and I'm a machine function, rather than I'm inspiring, I am deciding, I am taking risk, I am developing, I am nurturing, I am working hard and playing hard function that we kind of like in leadership.
Earlier, I said that in today's organization, leaders are more stressed. Employees are stressed as well, because if your leader's stressed, that's going to like trickle and domino effect across the whole organization. From my background, having worked in corporates for many years, I've been in places where systems have failed, projects have failed, leaders are getting stressed. I've experienced a leader like literally shout a man down on the office floor, and they were in tears because they didn't know how to handle that barrage that was like being targeted at them, all the way through to like people are now they're experiencing burnout. And I think the fact that now people are focusing on these things, this whole concept of the fact that burnout exists, that we need to look after our mental and emotional well-being. What can organizations do to support their people around this whole space?
It's a really interesting topic. I mean, the shouting thing is interesting in the sense that there's 2 times you should shout. And one is that if it's noisy and people can't hear you. And the second time is that if there's an immediate safety issue that you need to resolve, and that's it. And I remember reading that from a very good US naval fighter pilot who made that statement on a LinkedIn post a few years back. So I remember using it with my team. Because there's these learned behaviors of this is what it means to be in authority. This is what it means to be a boss. This is how you get your message across, as you show how frustrated and upset you are, and then they'll all magically get better. It just doesn't make sense. To burn out, the world, and it's a bit of a cliche, VUCA, we talk about this, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. The world is getting more complex. The volume of data that we're now able to consume and is being pushed into us is huge. The rate at which people want things done has moved to a point which is beyond the systems we have in place. Having a monthly steering group meeting is probably not at the tempo we need to understand what's going on with our customer base, with our clients, with our products, with our KPIs and everything else. But that's what our systems are set up for, a much, much slower world. And so as a consequence of this, you get lots of things that are happening ad hoc, happening in the gaps, and it's just filling in everyone's time. And I know companies that we've got people working 6 days a week, 12, 14-hour days, it's not sustainable. And sustainability is a whole nother conversation, which I'll come on to maybe later, hopefully. So how do we manage burnout? And again, the problem, of course, because to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But the major problem with burnout, especially in managers and leaders, is that we're doing too much of the wrong thing. We are not doing the leadership function. We are doing the higher paid person who knows how to do the job function. And because all of our people don't do anything unless we tell them to do it, because why would they? We end up basically telling them what to do. They have a go at it. We then have to correct it. They have another go at it. We then correct it again. And we do everything 3 or 4 times. I mean, ironically, for a theory or a system that's set up around management process optimization, we're awful at it on the micro level. And so The answer to burnout is certainly for leaders, is to start leading. I say a couple of things. Stop answering questions. When somebody comes to you, and I was great at this, mostly because I didn't know anything about the businesses I was a leader in. I was a fighter pilot, not a baggage handler, not a turnaround expert, not a travel and tourism expert. So when somebody comes to me and say, Paul, what price should we put our transfer rate at for the next month? I'd go, I don't know. What do you think we should put the transfer rate at? And then they go, oh, and they look all blank at you and going, oh, I don't know. Is this a trick? And I go, no, trust me, it's not a trick. I don't know the answer. What have you done in the past? What do you think the answer is? And then we'd explore that answer. Why, when they come back and say $52, you go, well, why not 51? Why not 53? Why did you pick that number? And then often you'd find that there was no real reason maybe, and that we should put in place some data analysis to give us a proper answer. That was the function of leadership for me. And that suddenly freed up time because, of course, you have that question session once, and now that team's informed, they go off, they know that they've got the answers and they can go and deliver the work. And I think for me, this is the big secret. The second big one is to stop having these meetings in the way that we do them, where we gather our team around and we ask them all to tell us about our day, and we then give them advice on what to do in their business areas for the next week. I tended to get rid of a lot of those and turn pretty much all of my meetings into workshops or training sessions. And why did I do that? Well, because we have reporting. I never understood this. We have our KPI dashboards, we have our reporting, we know what's going on. And if we don't understand something, we phone the person up, say, hey, Monica, how are you? Just seen that we're down a few percentage points on this. What's going on? I don't wait till the Monday meeting, or I shouldn't wait till the Monday meeting to put you on the spot and ask you about it. And so then we turn these into workshops, and the workshops are where we did what I was talking about earlier on. We solved these really difficult problems that required collaboration. And without going too much detail, this transition from giving people the answers, from having these meetings, that eats up so much of management and leadership time. If you get rid of those, you start asking questions, you start running problem-solving workshops, then it's about half. You get half your day back every day. And that's then the space where, one, you start to ease your burnout problems, and two, you start to then really make meaningful change on improving the business, not just firefighting the issues. And I think you said earlier on when you were talking is that things going wrong. And I can't remember exactly what you said, but things going wrong. This was one of the things that I was most shocked about when I came from the military to the business, was that we're quite happy and we tolerate far too often not doing what we said we were going to do. That just blew my mind. Okay, we make mistakes once. I'm not always on time for things, but do you know what I mean? Consistently over a period of time, if we say we're going to do something, we should do it. And I've been across countless businesses where there might be a standard and you'll go, oh, I see you're not reaching the standard. Yeah, we never reach that standard. And you're like, okay. And again, that's fine in the sense that, well, maybe that's acceptable, maybe it isn't. But my point is that then rewrite the standard to what you are achieving. And it comes back to that chat we had earlier on about the plan. If we're lying to ourselves, we do X, and we see this a lot in people engagement. Oh, we care for our employees. Okay, any specific evidence of where we do this? No, or we constantly fail. We've got loads of feedback saying we don't. Are we going to say that maybe we don't care for our employees so much, or we tolerate our employees? Set the standard that you want and then achieve it. And this, I think, was the big thing that drifts us off and means that we're chasing targets that either aren't real or come into favor for a month. And all of these things build up on the workload as well, which again, and it puts you into this spiral. We called it in the military getting behind the drag curve. Once an aircraft picked up too much drag, there wasn't enough power in the engines to overcome it, and you would crash. And I see a lot of businesses essentially behind the drag curve, which is why the hours are going up, the stress is going up, the burnout's going up, because without structural change, there's no amount of brute force is going to move the story forward.
I really found this getting half your day back fascinating, and I'm sure our listeners will that will trigger something actually, because we're all trying, like, time, right? Time is like so precious in all elements of our lives. So if we can get that half that time back and really use our time in a more proactive and thought through way, that would be so amazing. So I really feel everyone needs someone like you out there who can make people think differently and make them think about the way they do things and how they can improve it, because they may not know, right?
Absolutely. You said earlier on about it being learnable. I 100% agree with this. Paul Littlejohn is not some uniquely gifted leader. I was trained. I came from a small family, nothing particularly special or unique about it. But I then was accepted and adopted into the military training process. And I was trained how to be an officer. I was professionally trained how to lead. I was then trained how to fly airplanes, fight jets, and then fight them. And then I became a trainer. All of these were skills that I was taught, and anybody can learn them. And I'm exceptionally generous with people who don't operate in this way, because how would you pick it up? It's not, I mean, there's $1 billion plus leadership training industry out there. And it doesn't talk about these things in many cases. And it's certainly not on the syllabuses of many companies, syllabi of many companies. You can pick up the books, but which ones and how do you apply those contexts in real life? It's not just, and it's also just not a way that's taught. So I don't feel that anybody's at fault for not leading it this way. I feel that we should invest more in leadership training. I think you shouldn't promote people to team leader, to department head, to director, to senior manager, to VP without putting them through a meaningful training program that explains what their new job is and why it's different from being the head salesperson and then sales team leader. And that's a famous story about these things. But yeah, I think we need to do more education on this, and we need to give people the skills. And if you're listening at home and you're wondering, just go through your diary for the week and just mark which of these things are about setting direction and which of these things are about supporting your team. Which of these things are about taking accountability for what's gone on. And you'll notice that almost none of them are.
Mm.
They'll be about telling people what to do or listening to what they've done, or firefighting a particular issue in short term.
Mm.
And this is where our time gets eaten up. And we have to realize that everything that happens today is pretty much set in stone. I'm not fatalistic, but what I mean is that the preparation and planning and systems we've put in place in the past give us today.
Mm.
If we want tomorrow to look any different from today, we have to stop focusing on today and yesterday. We have to start focusing on what's going to be different in the future. And it does take a little bit of time, but not long. And as soon as you start asking your team questions, as soon as you start running problem-solving workshops, you'll be amazed what you find out. You'll be amazed how fast they learn. And that learning from them immediately starts to mean you can then start to delegate more. Once you start to delegate more, you get more performance from them. And rather than going down the drain, which we kind of talked about earlier on, you end up in this virtuous circle where each action you take, each action they take makes everything better. And it's a superpower, Monica. I used to shy away from saying this. It's 10x plus the performance of your team once you start to empower them, once you delegate responsibility. And it's not all soft and caring. When I talk about empowerment, it's not a gift. It's not that, okay, Monica, you can decide how you want to do this. You're empowered. No, it's an expectation that you are going to decide and you're going to move in the direction that we've talked about. It's not, I talk a lot about it from the soft sense because we've got plenty of hard in business. But my leadership is, and the leadership we talk about is, there's an expectation. Now I've given you the skills and the empowerment and the right to decide. I'm not going to tolerate you coming back going, what should I do? So I told you, get it sorted. Now that getting it sorted means I'm owning a whole bunch of accountability. If you do the wrong thing, I can't then shout at you for doing the wrong thing because I said, get it sorted. And hopefully so there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes on here, but you start to operate in this way and very, very quickly, the performance is exponential.
Wow. Wow. I love that. They're so useful and so relevant. And I think there's so much that you've just talked about that we can as managers and as leaders, we can pick those things and even start applying them straight away. And like you almost talked about tough love when you talked about the empowerment, and it's like
Yes.
putting someone, you know, in a bit of hot water and see how they do. And some people can like really thrive, and other people, they may get something wrong, but then supporting them on if they did it again, how would they improve it for next time?
And here you go. And it absolutely, and tough love is a nice way of putting it. I'm not a soft boss. I set high standards. Do you know what I mean? I had a career where exceptional was the norm. I demand a lot, but I'm also pragmatic about what the capabilities of my team are. There is absolutely no point in asking people to do things they can't do. And no amount of shouting at them is going to make them better. And no amount of me walking around going, I know the answer, why don't you, is going to help either.
Mm.
It just doesn't make any sense. And unfortunately we get into this loop because we promote people that are good at their job to be the leader of that team, and they know all the answers, and so they tell everyone all the answers all the time.
Mm.
And it's a hiding to nowhere. So it is tough love. There is high expectations. There is demanding targets. There is I expect you to decide within your skill set. And then we develop that skill set. Either you do it organically or they do it organically through learning. And then all of that is underpinned by this tolerance for error. And that's the other major difference that I didn't see very much in business, is that I said earlier on, we made mistakes all the time. And the job was impossible. Like 1,000 kilometers an hour, you can't slow down. You can't turn the radio off, slow down, open the map up, have a look what's going on. You are inexorably moving forward. And the world is going to keep interacting with you. And then you add all that and an active, engaged enemy who's not just interacting with you, but is actively trying to ruin whatever you're trying to do.
Mm.
It was inexorable, and we screwed up all the time. And we had a systematic process for learning, and we were tolerant of mistakes because nobody's coming into work, and nobody was going to be a fighter pilot. But let's bring it back to the office. No one is coming into work trying to screw up. And if they are, then fire them. Do you know what I mean? I'm not interested in that. If somebody's coming into work actively trying to be rubbish, then fine, fire them. Go. No, I've got no problems with that whatsoever. But most people, the vast, vast majority, are not coming into work trying to screw up. They're coming in probably with a level of psychological safety we have, just trying to get through the day. But they're probably just coming in, do their job, go home. Our job is to facilitate that, not to get in the way of it. So we are too quick to blame. We are too quick to blame individuals for things that are systemic failures. And this is one of my huge successes at Donato. I was really proud of with Gary Chapman was bringing in just culture to the organization, which essentially recognizes that invariably, a mistake or an error by a human being is a systemic issue. Insufficient training, an unusual situation, rule breaking for organizational gain is one of the common ones. We break rules to help the organization because the organization has not resourced things properly, or the process doesn't work properly, or there's demands from a sub-department or demands from a client. So we break a rule to help the company out. That's how good your people are. And none of those should be punished. All of those need a process of understanding why, understanding if this is common for the individual or the organization, and then systemic changes. And again, a little bit like if somebody doesn't do what you've asked them to do, it's your fault. This was another one that's challenging for managers, is that unfortunately, once you start thinking in a systems way, it's all work for the manager.
Mm.
So rather than right now, I go into work as the boss, Paul screws up and I go, right, Paul, you're in trouble. There's your written warning. Don't do that again. Done. Actually, now what happens is Paul screws up. We have to do a little bit of work to understand why. And then I have to go ahead and think about how I'm going to fix the systemic issue that's caused Paul to screw up.
Mm.
And that's another reason why a lot of this stuff doesn't get traction, is it requires more work. And we've already said people are already busy.
Yeah.
This is the sort of stuff you do in that half time I've given back, by the way. And that's again part of that virtuous circle. Now you've got half your time back. Now you can start looking at the systemic issues, and now you fix those, and suddenly your business is on. It's on a rocket ship. It's unbelievable.
No, it sounds amazing. And also it's about open-mindedness and in the project world, because that's where I've been working on in the last 20 years, we always have an end of project review Like what worked well, what didn't work well, and then what would we do differently next time? Because that's where you really have to do the work, right? You have to reflect on that experience that we went through for 6, 9, 12, 24 months, whatever it might be. And as human beings, we don't want to do the hard work, right? By nature, we want to do the easiest thing. And like you've said, like it's more work, but then if I don't need to do it, it sounds admin and all of those sorts of things. So it is really about showing people the power of the benefit of for having this mindset and then them seeing the results themselves.
I mean, I love debriefs. It's a bit of a cliche, I guess, within the military world, but we always talk about debriefs. Plan, brief, execute, debrief was the model, the cycle we went through. And interestingly, it's not something in that structured format that I've brought into business over the last 10 years. Business doesn't tend to work on those discrete projects. That makes sense. It tends to be you're running a business. It goes on and it goes on and it goes on, and that's what you do. So I haven't brought in this structure process, but what I have done is that where we've done discrete things, where we've tried something else out, there's this cycle of, as you say, after action review, learning from it, what happened, what went on, what can we do better. But that culture again isn't very prevalent. We walked into our debriefs and there was no rank. So I could have my boss's boss in the room, and I could be a junior pilot, and our perspective and our views and an evidence-based analysis of what was good, what was bad, what we could do differently was accepted by all on a basis of no rank. Was it perfect? No, people are people, but that was the intent. And that was broadly how it ran, is a big difference from business. And you don't see those rank-free debriefs happening in the way that I'd expect to see. And for me, I would change that whole concept of debriefing out into a kind of end of project workshop. Where we'd go, what did we try? And again, the way to this, what were we trying to do? How good was our plan? And this is the other thing that people forget is that you can have a good plan executed badly and fail. You can have a good plan executed well and fail because things change. And then all the permutations through that. And what I think we're really bad at is that companies and businesses and business managers focus an awful lot on outcomes, which is great. We like outcomes, focus on the outcome. But in terms of being a learning organization and in terms of developing, we have to understand how do we get to those outcomes. And often I see people will congratulate being lucky. A bad plan with mediocre execution that got away with it will be, and you're like, no, we should be sitting in a room now, berating ourselves and understanding how did we put together a plan that was, and similarly, and back to the kind of disciplining and performance management stuff is that people can do amazingly well on a bad plan, or they can fail with a bad plan, and we blame it on the execution. We don't go back and go, and this is probably where a lot of business sit, the process we've written down has no hope of working. I've asked you to serve that customer in 1 minute, 30 seconds on average. It's just not possible. Whoever in an office somewhere mapped out the precision time schedule has basically abdicated responsibility to the frontline workers, the lowest paid, most understressed workers, and they then have to pick up the slack. And what you often see is that then they'll make their shortcuts, rule breaking for organizational gain. And for months and months and months and years, they'll get away with it. And then one day something bad will happen and you'll go, disciplinary because you don't follow our rules. So these are the holes that people, companies, organizations, managers get themselves into by not having a systematic approach for learning and understanding what's actually delivering the outcomes. Is it good luck? Is it bad luck? Is it good people managing a bad process? Is it a great process that's being badly executed? And any combination of the above.
And I really think risk management and having contingency plans become really important in the workplace as well. And from your background, you know, this whole being ready and the fighter pilot mindset, you know, from your experiences from the military background, this whole notion of readiness, risk management, like how do these relate to the world of business?
Risk is central to a lot of, and I reflect on this a lot, is that a lot of how I think, the way I think, do the way I do things, the way I do, is a nuanced risk management approach. And people are doing risk management all the time. One shouldn't say that business and managers don't do risk management. They do. It's just that we don't know we're doing it necessarily, and it's not structured. And risk management seems to be the purview of insurance or safety critical businesses. A safety critical business will have a risk register. If you walk into a business that's not safety critical and ask them if they had a risk register, I think you'd be surprised to find one. I've got 70% of my revenue tied up in 2 clients. Is that on a risk register anywhere? Probably not. It's probably just something somebody knows, and maybe they're working towards diversifying their client base. But almost certainly that company won't have a risk register and won't systematically review the mitigations, the impacts, and know their collective risk, whether that be safety, whether that be business, whether that be people. Talent and culture is another good one. What is the risk that Monica's going to leave? How critical is Monica to our company right now? What's our mitigations? Are we prepared? And again, we talk about people leaving companies and then being offered a pay rise. If organizations were actively managing risk, then the right thing, that pay rise coming earlier to mitigate the high chance that Monica is going to go and jump to that new company that's joined because she's got the right skill sets and I've seen them advertising for it. Where does she sit on our risk grid? Oh, let's mitigate. These things don't happen. And they are all risk management processes, exactly like there's a trip hazard across the middle of the floor, or should I put a banister on the stairway? But we're not trained. Again, it's another one of these massive gaps in leadership. All leadership decisions. Do we go left? Do we go right? What's our vision? All of that are risk management decisions. We do it all the time. We're not trained how to do it. You just pick it up through life by trial and error. But as soon as you start getting into challenging problems, having this and numerous problems and numerous risks to manage, having this structured approach to risk management is really important. And it's one of the things, again, I think that I've noticed that I had been trained to a very, what's the word I'm looking for, nuanced and highly developed way of understanding risk. And it was a big contrast when I came to business, that outside of management consulting, which tend to do it very well, it just doesn't seem to be so prevalent in businesses. And again, of course not, because where in your life, in your promotion through an organization to MD or CEO, do you go on a risk management course?
Yeah, there's probably
if you did any leadership training at all, it wouldn't have included a risk management course over 3 days where you understood likelihood, severity, mitigations, tolerable, as low as reasonably practical, and all the other things that you would want to know about risk. It just doesn't exist. And we were very lucky. These were the sorts of courses that we went on as officers to do our job that gave us this basket of leadership skills that I now try and pass on to others.
So much wisdom, honestly. I love it. I love all of what you've said today has been like so meaningful and powerful. It takes me into this, like, I wonder what kind of mindset you have. So what is the fighter pilot mindset?
It's about making progress. It's about a journey, essentially, and it's about being smart, lazy, as I like to call it. The world is complex, and I think we try and over control what we do, what we can control. We have very little control over our world, what we think, what we say, what we do, a little bit of influence in a bubble around us, but otherwise there's 8 billion people all doing their own life out there. And the fighter pilot mindset is about getting stuff done, achieving the mission. So a couple of principles. That one, don't go alone. First step in doing anything, do not go alone. Find somebody to come with you. But after that, it's about the practical, very practical execution of a mission. Things are easy to say, they're exceptionally hard to do. I've been in ops my whole life, and people glibly say that we're going to do things. And then when you start to unpack what's actually required to make that thing real, it's a massive list. So people generally overestimate what they can achieve in a short period of time, under-resource, have no fat in the plan for the outside world coming in. Then the number of plans I see, well, that's actually a good plan. So, I mean, some of the best plans I see are plans that if everything goes well, they would work. I just don't think that's a good plan, because rarely does everything go well, but at least It's grounded in logic. Some of the worst plans I see have got big sections of them which are hope, which are they'd be really happy if these amazing things happen, then our plan would work. A lot of corporate processes are basically either ideal world processes or they are hope processes. And they absolutely rely on some extraordinary good things happening to even be real. Whereas I much prefer to plan with a sense of buffer. And our business people sit and go, that's inefficient, Paul. You're building in waste already. And you are, yes. Because I know that the world is not going to do what I want. If I'm working with human beings, if I'm working with customers, unless I'm running an actual machine, and even they have fat built in terms of maintenance downtime and preventative maintenance downtime. So the people that run machines know this. The people that run humans like machines don't. Is that you need some buffer. So you're working 80% so that you can surge, so that you can deal with things. So it's all about essentially doing an appropriate amount of preparation, building plans that have some chance of success, and then stepping out confidently into the world, knowing you've thought about the risk, knowing you've got contingency plans if A and B happens, and then making these decisions and moving yourself one step at a time along the journey towards your objective. And the mindset's really the collection of these thoughts around risk, around leadership, around decision making, around what we can and can't change, around practical application of skills, knowledge, behaviors to move a story forward, applied uniquely to an individual's circumstances. So that's the difference from my perspective, is that I've been very fortunate. I've spent 30 years doing this at this level, to the level where it's all now first principles. I can't give an answer to Monica and an answer to Paul and an answer to Steve. It will be entirely different because everyone's circumstances are different and everyone's circumstances are nuanced and everyone's starting position is different. So that's really how you then start to apply the Wingman principle in helping other people, is that the transfer of that knowledge, that support in a unique and contextually relevant way.
Amazing. And as we start to come to the end of today's conversation, which I've thoroughly enjoyed, if you were to offer 3 tips to our audience based on those 30 years of experience, I'm going to say you don't look like you've got 30 years of experience, but that's like a different conversation. What are those 3 tips that you would like to share with our audience today?
I'm going to spread them around some domains. I think if you're in business and you're managing a team of people, I would say that my number 1 piece of advice is genuinely stop answering questions. We mentioned that earlier on, is that next time somebody who asks you something, then don't be an idiot about it, but play back to them with a question and explore their knowledge. I think the second one for people in life making decisions, I think, is to bring your decision horizon closer. And I ask this, who thinks back 5 years and goes, where did I think I'd be 5 years time? And is anybody where they thought they'd be? Very, very rare. I've met nobody that goes, oh yeah, I'd be running a podcast in Dubai 5 years time. No, life is not that predictable. And in fact, it's much more chaotic than we think, even without an active, engaged enemy trying to ruin your day. So I tell people that have a long-term destination, but in terms of your goal setting, your planning, your thing, bring that decision horizon forward and then take your active steps to move towards it and move the chains, as they say in American football, one step at a time. So that's kind of lifey stuff. And a third thing to take away, it's tricky without context. I think it would be take some time to understand risk. I think it's a huge factor in our life and covers so many domains, whether it be child rearing, parenthood, whether it be business, whether it be sports, whether it be life decisions. I see and I experience and I read a lot of people taking what we would class as unnecessary risk. So one of our doctrines is that you should take a risk where the benefits outweigh the costs. You should never take unnecessary risk. And I see and hear a lot of people that do things where my brain just goes, nothing good can come from this decision. And we do it all the time, silly things like putting my cup on the side of the table next to the laptop here. And you go, look, nothing good can come of putting it there. Oh, do you mean it's not the right place for what I need? The only thing that can happen is I can knock it over and ruin my laptop. It's one of those ones, and now and hopefully now you've thought of this, you'll start seeing it all over. Is that we take a lot of unnecessary risks. I'll stick my phone under my arm to get my bag out of the car. And you go, no, just put the phone on the seat so I don't drop it. I'm not gaining anything here, a fraction of a second. And so understanding risk and avoiding unnecessary risks, I think would be my third one, but not in a soundbite. Sorry, Monica.
It's all right, no problem. Thank you so much. Paul, aka the Wingman, how do people reach out to you, find out more about you?
I am most prolific on LinkedIn. So Paul Littlejohn is on LinkedIn. My website is wingmanexecutive.com, and that's a great place to reach me. And there's a place on there where you can reach me. And I'm also up on Instagram as Wingman Executive. And those are probably the three best places to find me.
Wonderful. Paul, thank you so much for joining today's You Got This podcast. It's been a huge honor to have you here, and I've just had a really awesome time, like listening to you and like just seeing where this conversation went, and those combining that military background with the business world, it just really brought things to life and really, resonated so much in terms of how we can use that knowledge in everyday life. So a big thank you for that. And a big thank you to my listeners. And remember, you've got this.
Thank you so much, Monica. I really appreciated it. It's a really, really nice opportunity.